Well, all right, here we are. Wow. Let's get this going, huh? Trying a new camera angle out. What do you think? And I'm wearing this hat. Elephant in the room. I got this hat on. I know. I don't know what to say about it. But it's there. It's a choice. I made that choice. And now we're all living with it. So, yeah. Hey, welcome to my second video on what is in my case. I did a video about this about a year ago. A lot of changes have happened. You can see that video here. I'll put a link somewhere. I don't know where they display anymore. It's always so funny. You see that on videos now. Oh, it's here. And then the link is never there. The case has definitely evolved a lot since that last video. A lot of stuff is still here, but there's been a lot of changes. Obviously, right here, the Moog semi-modulars have gone back to their original cases, back into their 3-tier rack, and we have now 2 Mantis cases chock full of modules. You know, I can't imagine anyone needing more than this. What this setup gives you. You see these people with these huge wooden racks. So to have such a big rack where you're really never using everything all at once. It's like that movie. I wanted to just go and run through sort of what changes have happened here and sort of the thought on the layout. All things considered, I'm probably still not done arranging things here, but this is sort of where I landed. So I think when you have a case with as many modules as this, there's a few things you want to keep in mind. First is what you're using the most, what you're physically touching the most. Then it's also the proximity to power supply. Especially when I had these big Moog cases, these eat up 60 HP of space. And what sometimes people don't consider is that underneath all of that is power supply that other modules need. So your cables have to get to those power supplies behind a big module like that. Same thing down here with these bigger modules. Same thing here with Star Labs. So there's power behind these modules that all these other ones need. And so you kind of have to plan for that. And then there's also, module chaining. And that also goes with efficient use of patch cables. In arranging this, the thing I've thought about is like one thing goes to this module, goes to this module, goes to this module, goes to this. So like you can use a series of shorter cables and they're all sort of chained together in a way that gets you to the output section with relatively smaller cables. And then there's also just like the sheer space. Sometimes certain things aren't going to fit together because of how big the modules are and the collection you have on a given row. And so sometimes things have to be put into areas that maybe aren't the most ergonomic or the most that make the most sense, but that's just where they end up fitting. So for this next part, I think I'm going to actually go over to the computer and let's look at the case on Modular Grid. All right, we're at the computer. This is a screenshot from Modular Grid. By the way, obviously Modular Grid is an amazing tool. I'm sure all of you use it. I pay to use Modular Grid because I just can't even imagine doing this hobby without it. Great service, and I am very appreciative of them. But what I did here is, and the reason for this is because this actually gives me the ability to kind of show sort of the zones and sort of the things that I have going on here. So the first thing we have here is the sequencer row. This is the first row you saw in the case. This is all the sequencers that I have. And the thought here is from sort of right to left, it kind of gets a little more abstract as it goes. So the Endorphin's ground control is very musical. It's essentially a keyboard. Metropolix, a little more abstract, but it has presets and can do a little more. And then the Variegate is kind of an improvisational module. As it moves this way, it kind of gets a little more experimental, I guess. The next zone here is sort of what I call generative fun. And so this is where I'll use like a Variegate or the GX expander of Metropolix, which these are all gate outputs. And I also got Mutable Instruments branches. I have Euclid. I have Instro EAS. I guess I'm not even going to say that as a word. That's an EAS. Anywho. And then I have this mixer here, just I use as sort of CV attenuation. And then I also use a Taiso Daiko. And while this isn't exclusively for generative things, it is fun to have in the middle of this sort of column of these gates, because it's so sort of like gate driven. Obviously, I could take the gates from either one of these and send them over here and use it that way as well. So then I have my mixing section, and I just got the IntelliGel mix up. This adds 3 more channels to my setup. So before I had the 4 channels, added the 3 here, and then everything goes out of stereo strip. I use this as sort of my master volume. I know I could be using this differently, and it finally started making sense to me, like what the intent of this was, to have multiples of these. But you know, it's to do that in stereo is like a lot of utility. So anyway, I just use it as a master volume control and output. That goes out to my desktop mixer over on next to my computer. Next is all the oscillators. You know, I did want to get as much stuff as that I use all the time as close to this output section as possible. There's going to be some obvious limitations with that. You know, the data bender and surface I use a lot, and so these need to be here because I don't want to use like crazy long cables with those. But as far as the output goes. But anyway, so these are the oscillators, and I'm including Taiso Daiko in that, but I also have the Castor and Pollock Mark II with the nice big chunky knobs, the Make Noise XPO, the Nobula Polycinematic, the Acid Rain Chainsaw, and Mutable Instruments Beads, which also is part of the effects, but also has, I believe, like 8 oscillator algorithms from Platts in its Easter egg mode. Next up is filters. I have 3. I have the WMD Carbon filter. I have the Endorphin's Ghost filter. And I believe I had just gotten this in my last video. And then I have the Filter 8. And I did originally want to try to put these in sort of like an order of like oscillator, filter, VCA, but it just the way I couldn't do that. But I did put Ghost next to XPO because XPO is a stereo module, and this is my only stereo filter. So I can use these 2 together and then straight into the quad VCA. Then is modulation and envelopes. So a lot here. Some things are kind of interesting adds like Metropolix. This does have a mod lane out, so you can use this as just a modulation source. I don't really do that very often, but it's always there if I needed it. Other thing is Filter 8 can also be an LFO, so that is super handy. Obviously maths and offset and attenuate ×2 from ALM. Pip slope. Pamela's new workout obviously has a lot of modulation output. Oct by DivKid and Instruo. Zadar, which is new for me, pretty new, but I have been really enjoying and using a lot. I just got a Dope dual sample and hold, and last a Synthrotek ADSR. And this is, I mean, for the most part, this is what I would call my sort of modulation modules. I know I can do some other stuff with some of my other modules I have here, but these are the ones that like I'm always sort of going to. VCAs. I have the IntelliGel Quad VCA. I have a Dope Quad VCA. And then I have this Arcus Audio 2HP VCA. Again, VCAs I wanted close to my mixer section for obvious reasons. I threw this one over here just to kind of put some VCA functionality out on this side of the case in case I needed it. But yeah, pretty straightforward on the VCAs. Effects. Newest addition is the MFX from ALM. I should have also maybe included this as a utility because it does have a couple utilities built in, like a scope, which I've actually been enjoying using quite a bit. Also like a clock tracker. There's a few others. Pretty cool. But Aurora from Qubit. I actually tried selling this recently, and it just kind of sat on reverb. And so rather than having an empty hole in the case, I decided, you know what, I'm going to slap it back in there. I'll probably end up selling it again. So if you're interested, shoot me a message. Beads, Starlab, Ghost is also a delay and reverb, and Data Bender. These pretty much cover everything I would want to do with effects. That they really, I think, cover a lot of ground. You know, even with Aurora, I know there's alternate firmware. So I've never tried it. I may try it. It seems like the alternate firmware seems to be a little more of a normal reverb. I just think Aurora does not deliver on what it sort of implies it would deliver on. It is, I think, a very unwieldy reverb. You really have to dial it back, like to the point of why bother? Like, why bother if you have to have it so low on all the settings? Like, what's the point of this reverb if I can barely use its full potential? So I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing. If you have any tips on Aurora, please send them my way because I would love to hear about that. But no complaints about anything else. I would say all of these are amongst my favorite sounding effects that I've ever heard. They're all great. I love them all. Drums, Rample and Taiso Daiko. I'm also including this Dope mixer because this really was added in combination with Rample. So what I'll do is I'll put Rample into this, and then I can have panning of all 4 channels from Rample. So that's why I've included that, although it's really more of a utility, but it's part of my drum setup. And obviously the drum gates out of ground control, and that's why these two are kind of near each other. Then I have utility and mult. These are just raw utilities. These are not, so I'm not including that in, say, like a mixer section or modulation. These are pure just utility. So really, you know, it's just these mixers and this mult. And I put this mult as sort of dead center as I could, just so that I could kind of use it from any direction. And it kind of is pretty much dead center. And last, while this isn't like a common category, I did want to point out that I do have these 4 2HP modules. The Euclid and ARP I just put in last night. These 3 have always been here. This one is actually an extender, an output extender for Castor and Pollux. That really could probably come out. I don't use it very much. It's there until I don't need it or I need to move it out for something else. But these 2 HPs did sort of go in and sort of fill some space and some gaps. And I always think it's interesting when people have a few 2 HPs in their case, and I'm curious what they do. Up here, I have a lot of smaller modules. I have branches and this ADSR and the carbon filter and chainsaw and dual. So it's like a lot. One of the things you don't consider when you have these small modules is the power usage. It's not even so much of like hitting any power limits, but it's like occupying a lot of power. It's taking up terminals in your power supply. So when you have like a large concentration of small modules, it's like, oh crap, like where am I going to find all the power for this? Luckily, these TipTop cases have like 1 million terminals. They seem to be able to handle it. The other thing I didn't mention is this MIDI. I still have it because I have ground control now. And this also does a lot of MIDI handling. I probably would get rid of this if I had to make room as well. But this is my sequencer row, so there's not making room down here doesn't help me out anywhere else throughout the case. So I guess if I needed another small module that had something to do with my output section, this would be a good slot to put it in. Maybe a guitar input module might be interesting there. So, anyway, so that's a spot that's up for grabs. But anyway, let's see what this all looks like with all the colors. Oh, yeah. That is one pretty rainbow of modular fun. Cool. All right, well, let's go sit next to the case again. Wow, this has been a real multimedia experience, hasn't it? With the case in real life and then the case on the computer and then this fun camera angle. This is really something special, and thank you. I hope to have a few more talking videos. I have a few ideas for new videos coming up. I just am grateful to have a place to share this somewhere with people who also care about this stuff. So thank you for watching. I appreciate the slow and steady growth of the channel. Every week we get a few. There's like a production team here. I get a few new followers each week, and I really appreciate that. I enjoy having a space to be able to share this. So thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're a trooper, and I appreciate you. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.